is my honor to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Russ Klein. Russ has led marketing and advertising teams in the C-suite level for over 30 years, becoming a Fortune 500 CMO at the age of 29. He has quarterbacked teams for many of the world's foremost brand names, holding up top posts at Dr. Pepper, 7-Up companies, 7-Eleven, Burger King, Church's Chicken, and the Arby's Restaurant Group. Since 2014, Russ has been the CEO of the American Marketing Association. Please join me in welcoming tonight's keynote speaker, Russ Klein.
Thank you so much, Nick. Is the mic tuned in? Great. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Hello. It's great to be back in Dallas. This is a town I've had 2 tours of duty here at Dr. Pepper 7-Up and 7-Eleven, both, as Nick just mentioned, and I have great memories and incredible learning experiences. Both of them were for me along my professional career. So I'm delighted to return here and share some thinking with you all. I'm no oracle, so we'll get that out of the way right now. But I will say I have some observations to share with you. As the head of the American Marketing Association, I enjoy a vantage point to see the industry without the day-to-day crush that you all face as marketing executives. And it's a nice perspective that has helped me reevaluate a number of things over my career as of recent. So I'm going to share some observations, some implications, and a few occasional retracings back into history just for historical perspective. Certainly, marketing itself is going through nothing short of a whiplash of ferocious and unstoppable change. Moore's Law, which was predicted to run out of gas in our lifetime, keeps powering ahead. Better, more powerful, faster, smaller, cheaper. Moore's Law gets a lot of attention, but what doesn't get enough attention is Metcalfe's Law. You all know Metcalfe's Law? In 1993, Robert Metcalfe noticed that the value of telecommunications network was proportional to the square of the number of users in the system, now famously known as the Metcalfe's Law or network effect. It's the law of utilities that explains the dynamic as to why, if you were the only person in the world with a telephone, it would be useless. It'd have no value. But with every new phone owner, your telephone becomes more useful and more valuable. But who dreamed that it would be responsible for explaining the power of Facebook, the power of social currency, the connectivity and digitization of old-fashioned word of mouth? Every share is like adding a phone. Every like, post, or comment, every emoticon is like a call on the network, a jolt of social power pulsing through the grid of pop culture, powered by Metcalfe's Law. And it's both a vital channel and a tool for marketers, and one that is coveted because it is the way into customer engagement. So I shouldn't have been so shocked when I read that people are expected now to consume over 5 years of their life engaged in social media. With the equivalent use of that time, I would be able to walk my dog 93,000 times. Maybe my dog lived that long. But just as I was about to become outraged, I realized that it still ranks second behind the 7 years of your life that you'll be spending watching television. Think about that. When we think there can't be any further evolution or innovation on a given issue, we get schooled. Automation, automating automation, bots managing bots. In this network-based world, there is a constant emergence of the next thing, and the underlying cross-currents and paradoxes abound. People want to shrink their carbon footprint, but they want to increase their digital footprint. And as we reach a saturation point on devices, chatbots have not only taken customer service to a new level, they're aggregating millions of devices and making lives easier. An additional silver lining is perhaps permitting more undivided attention from the chronic multitasking something advertisers looking to get their money's worth have been worrying about. When, though, have we innovated past not just a diminishing return, but even a negative return? In a technology-fueled effort behind sustainability, we've managed to breed the taste out of vine-ripened garden tomatoes in favor of making them bigger, harder, sturdier for reduced shipping and storage costs. But there's no taste in the tomatoes. Is that innovation at its best? It's a delicate dance. More paradoxes like the rise of individualism and the increasing consciousness of the greater good, which are on collision course. You want personalization without giving up privacy. You want everything for yourself, but you also want everyone else to get what they need. And how do we balance the right to not have our children vaccinated with the risk of an airborne disease infecting an entire population? It's a predicament. How is it that effective household income is well below its highs for virtually every income bracket, and yet consumer confidence is at an all-time high over the last 16 years? Duke University's 2017 CMO survey, in partnership with the AMA, recently has revealed results that show marketing spending is projected to be up 11% going into next year. That is a high watermark versus the Great Recession. And I think most of you here remember the 2008 Great Recession. Perhaps the ultimate paradox of this new network-enabled world is the renewed and epic struggle between time-honored archetypes of good versus evil. The good, the more opportunity to learn, more open discourse, more improved problem solving, more innovation, more democratized access to knowledge. This emergent system that surrounds us has created an empowered group of designers, developers, and other innovators in a billion expressions of creative disobedience that spark every second. Asymmetrical, nonlinear innovation has finally been unleashed, unsuppressed by the risk of systems that historically rewarded playing it safe. And the beauty of a population filled with so many essentially anonymous innovators is their complete willingness to try so-called dumb ideas, something corporate innovation typically avoids in favor of protecting egos, internal politics, and even careers. This new world of a connected intelligence has also brought ideas for how we can become stronger together. Now research shows that diversity, not IQ, is the magic elixir for improved problem solving. Research from MIT's Media Lab shows that adding so-called smart people to a team has diminishing returns on the team's problem-solving capabilities. Conversely, adding diverse points of view seems to virtuously improve the team's puzzle-solving and code-cracking with almost no diminishing return. So instead of obsessing over whether or not you're the smartest person in the room, worry about whether you're creating a climate that celebrates divergent thinking and thinkers around common problems. Now that's the good. Then there is the evil. It's also become clear that the hate-spewing dark side of the internet is as organized and effective, if not more so, at using social media to advance its sinister intentions. And as if we needed a case in point, recently a host of brands cut their UK spending with Google after learning their ads had inadvertently run alongside toxic content of videos from terrorist sympathizers. And of course, brand safety and reputational threats are not new, but they're certainly more acute, more sudden, and more far-reaching. All of these new world issues present tensions. Some are zero-sum games for us. And amidst all this, the average consumer is getting bombarded with 10,000 messages a day and changes screens 21 times in an hour. Foundational concepts such as brand loyalty are under siege, resetting discussions around how to even get a customer's attention. How do we get attention in this blizzard? One so-called new answer is content marketing. Is content marketing really new? Perhaps. I've been living in parallel universe, I guess, for the last 30 years, because I know B&B marketers have been doing content marketing for decades. I'll concede that what's new is the adoption by B2C brands, and I'll concede that the digitization of the world, the connectedness is driving it more than ever, but all complements of Metcalfe's law. More importantly now, and into the future, a marketer has to have a wider aperture with a view of the overall impact of new technologies and an understanding of the connections between people and their communities and their environment. Systems thinking. This means instead of producing widgets, we're better served by creating relationships and connections that lead to solutions as we also endeavor to be guardians for the greater good. And in the meantime, the likes of Amazon, Uber, Apple have raised the game such that there are now equal expectations for the same utility, ease, and convenience in every category. No industry space is an island. You expect American Airlines to be as effortless and friction-free as Uber, or else. Customers have to glide across omni-channel experiences, and falling short against these new standards is viewed as incompetence. Today's increasingly discriminating environment for customer satisfaction, if you don't deliver on your customers' expectations, they may do more than stop buying you. They may create an overnight movement against you. Whatever you're selling, it better be one click, a one-command experience, whereby you're not wasting what has become more valuable than the customer's money, that is their time. The linear hierarchy of effects that we all have been working with for over 50 years has been blown up and become an amorphous, circuitous maze. And customer journeys, of course, are all the rage. But I want to say to you tonight, it is quite possible that there may be no such thing as a customer journey. Or there may not be one in the future. What am I talking about? 75% of all content consumption is gushing through mobile. Add to that the totality of other technologies, augmented reality, virtual reality, wearables, sensors, cloud-based capacity, and the overall digital-physical fusion occurring, and you have a bona fide revolution for location-based experiences. And that is what drives relevance more than any other single factor. Context. Context. The social mobile local trend has elevated context over even personalization as the holy grail for marketers. Sense, search, get. It's why search is exploding, of course. Marketers and audiences now connect often without any visible intermediaries, including the transaction. Consumers want useful experiences across their devices. By useful, I mean solutions that work, that perform jobs they were hired to do. The compression of time spent between sensing a need and the decision to purchase a product to satisfy that need is becoming essentially a simultaneous event. One day, it may be likened to the 16th century philosopher Descartes. His existential pondering, I think, therefore I am, may be tomorrow's customer journey. That's right. I think, therefore my customer journey is complete. It's not that far-fetched. Forrester shows the evolution of keyword search now entering an era of cognitive search. So the alchemy of artificial intelligence, implants, wearables, sensors is poised for another step change we probably can't quite appreciate. Just thinking about a product may one day be all that's necessary to complete a transaction. Deliverable within a few days by a self-driving 18-wheeler, or a few hours by a drone, or a few minutes by 3D printing. And then don't ask me what that means for returns. We would all agree that the more impulsive our decisions are, the poorer our decisions are, right? So if there is little or no distance between sensing a need and gratification, is that good for us as a society? Recent nutrition research has shown that by simply slowing down the payment mechanics and the selection process in a vending machine, it resulted in consumers making healthier snack choices by slowing it down. And what I'm about to say next will be perceived by many as pure heresy if I haven't already looked like a lunatic to you. But I want to pose the idea that brand loyalty may not be a thing in the future. Instead, it might be about usefulness and utility, and I'll explain why. My observation is that if something works better today in this society, people find out about it fast, and they switch. And loyalty just becomes a historical, sentimental artifact. With such large gaps in public trust in so many areas of our society now, the climate for building meaningful loyalty is unstable at best. Technology has redirected us instead, I think, to functionality and usability. And we've become like children playing with toys at a table who will set down the broken one and pick up the one that works without any hesitation or sentimental value for the one that broke. Brand loyalty. The performance tolerance ante has been raised for all brands at the table. Now, as a civilization, we've gone through many profound life-changing passages already. The information age, the internet age, the broadband age, the convergence age, the mobile age. The way I see it, it's back to the future. Technology has enabled a return to the one-on-one customer relationships that once existed in the 19th century merchant economy that predated mass marketing. And no, I was not there. However, there are two key post-digitization differences. The first is a pervasiveness, some might say an invasiveness, of computing that is always on, always with us, an unrelenting ceaselessness for the user. Almost a certifiable trance at times. Second, those one-on-one connections increasingly are not with a human. They're with algorithms, chatbots, auto centers, auto call centers, kiosks, and other impersonal interfaces, including mobile phones. And still, technology is giving marketers access to customers like never before and insights into their behaviors like never before. And when it's done right, marketers can enrich the experiences for customers. Allow me to delve further into this notion of usefulness becoming what matters, sharing some recent learning from Facebook on their use of customer service chatbots. Working with some telecom brands, they program chatbots to warm up the personalities of the chatbots. That makes sense, right? Trying to, get the cold technology warmed up a little more friendly. But they found that programming bots to automatically return phrases like, "We really value you as a customer," was overcompensating. The insight was, in the case of telecom anyway, that when customers have a problem they're trying to address, expressing empathy through adding words does nothing more than lengthen the conversation when action is all the customers want. The better strategy, indicated, is solve the common problems as quickly as possible and spare customers the small talk. Solve my problem and let me go back to my life. That's the emerging, impatient, spoiled, Amazoned self, who just wants the product or service to work right in the first place because time isn't just money, it's more valuable. And all this is why the notion of the user experience is being worshipped by marketers. And those who can't find religion will be left behind. In this sense, I think it's important for marketers to realize that it's not our job to design experiences. Instead, it's our responsibility to design for experiences, meaning that good design, experience design, should be to customer journeys what the proverbial dirt path is to sidewalks. You can try to put signs up or seal the cracks on the sidewalk to get people to use it, but your best experience design will be to plant flowers along the path that they're already using. Now I'm going to turn to another area. A framework that I've been using most of my career. It's an oversimplified framework, and it's how I think about branding and the components inside of branding, and maybe how change is affecting that equation with a little bit of historical perspective. Think of modern marketing let's say 50 years or so, up through the late 90s, that period, that was mass media, mass marketing. At that point, we were basically in the promise-making business over that 50-year period, weren't we? And not much in the promise-keeping business, which was the experience side. Part of what gave marketing a bad name, frankly. Less so on the promise-keeping side. And then some factors began smoldering in the 90s. Internet commerce was set into motion. And by early 2000s, all of this came into focus. 4 events. First, the birth of internet commerce. Second, the fusion of design thinking and brand building by Apple, who coined the term user experience in 1993. 3, the birth of network-powered social currency. We've talked about Metcalfe's law. And 4, about the same time, Starbucks showing up at every street corner. Why do I pick Starbucks? Because they built their brand almost exclusively through experience. And they let their brand get defined by experience. They didn't care about getting big ad budgets. They could have afforded them if they wanted to. They built that brand through experience, calling marketers' attention to that side of the equation. These 4 factors changed the equation to now brand equals the story plus the experience. Now you might say, well, that's pretty straightforward, Russ. Makes sense that we would move from promise making to storytelling. A lot of ad veterans would say it's not new to be talking about storytelling, and they would be right. What's different is that we aren't in charge of writing the brand story anymore. It's a co-creation. And once the customer gained a seat at the table of storytelling, they gained a stronger voice to also insist on accountability for the experience. So how can we talk about fierce change and not also challenge the concept that has served us for almost 70 years, the 4 Ps? I'll call this into question because this was created by the AMA. I've already questioned brand loyalty, customer journeys, and content marketing, so I'm a heretic. Now I'm going to pick on something the AMA created, the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps have certainly stood the test of time, and we could argue and defend that they still are rooted in reality and make up for a helpful reference for marketers. And I don't have a new sticky acronym for you, unfortunately. But here's what I will tell you. My modern lens looks at the 4 Ps. It is not product anymore. It is life solutions, with a constancy of usefulness above all else. It is not price, but time. Yes, people's value systems are comprised of other forms of currency too, maybe cost, maybe knowledge, maybe data, maybe trust are as valuable as money. But time is the one resource as an unrenewable and finite resource that's coming into vivid focus in humanity and in the marketplace. Not place, but context, access, and immediacy. I've always felt that place or distribution was the most underrated or underappreciated P of the 4 Ps. But now it has got the top of the mountain because it drives context. And then promotion is storytelling. Of course, brands are differentiating themselves now, not based on what they make or what they do or what they sell, but instead what they know. Educating their prospects, slyly moving them through the funnel Death Star to get conversion. Content marketing. Content marketing, let's just say it is new for some brands. It's still only part of the story. I didn't write this cartoon, I'm merely sharing it with you. As you chase content marketing, my caution to you is beware of a content marketing bubble. As a positive example, Chipotle is promoting an unbranded video series meant to teach kids about making good food choices. What I love about it, I think it's smart and it shows confidence that if the customer gets good information that their product will ultimately benefit. But not everybody is playing nicely in the sandbox. Seeing an emerging cynicism setting in because, like anything, some people are doing it poorly or worse, unethically. Any skeptics or cynics out there want to wager which bubble bursts first? Content marketing, influencer marketing, or brand loyalty? Jack Nicholson. Does anybody do a good imitation of Jack Nicholson in here? You have his voice in your head at least, right? Jack Nicholson, in one of his up-close and personal interviews, once said, "Lots of people try to give advice. I tend to listen to people who aren't the advice-giving type." Content marketers. But co-creation era is here to stay. We're all broadcasters, we're all publishers, we're all would-be rebel-rousers. And just as marketing has traditionally relied on the talent of Don Draper or Peggy Olson, now there are writers of a different kind crafting software code, powering customer experiences and marketing operations. And soon the Internet of Information, powered by blockchain technology. If you are not up to date on this, you need to get up to date. The world will change again. It will be turning the Internet of value that enables citizens to monetize their own data and knowledge. It will eventually distribute trust directly into the hands and control of billions of people. Wow. So how are we getting all of this work done as marketers? Well, marketers are evolving too. Leonardo da Vinci in the 16th century said, "Everything is connected to everything else." He got it. So too is the field of marketing, where once self-identifying as internal creative orchestrators in the enterprise, marketers are evolving into external nodes who are connectors in the global network. Today's CMO looks more like yesterday's CIO, if you ask me. Today's CMO connects internal teams to more information services and collaborators than ever before, making a marketer's desktop look more like that of a 747 cockpit. This connected and interactive dynamic is the new wonder tonic for managers who have been clamoring for measurability in marketing. So it's no surprise to learn from the CMO survey and data analytics spending projected by these CMOs over the next 3 years, expected to grow 376%. Prognosticators are probably accurate who say that it's just another year or two when the CMO's MarTech stack, their technology budget, is going to be larger than the CIO's IT budget. Data-driven management has grown as a powerful movement, countering the mental biases that we all think we check at the door but sometimes don't. This democratization is, of course, empowering everyone within the enterprise beyond the so-called experts in the marketing silo. In my days in retail and restaurants, I used to say the store manager trumps the brand manager every time. How many times have the best laid plans and promises of a marketer become unrecognizable, unfulfilled, because the front line of the enterprise was unaligned, uninformed, and uninspired? Now, those once tip-of-the-whip employees are empowered with data that the marketer hopes will come back to them. The shift in power driven by the data-rich internet is democratizing everything. And another challenge, of course, is the allocation facing marketers between traditional and digital media, cross-media measurement, and helping brands have a single view of the customer and how their content performs across all of these media platforms. But God, there's so much to measure now. Marketers are struggling to simplify and identify what measures and metrics matter. Even with all the money being thrown at data analytics, per the CMO survey, almost 2/3 of CMOs either cannot quantify the impact of their marketing efforts or are unable to show the value of their efforts to their CEO. 2/3 admitted that. Now, to be fair, finance and accounting have been around for a long time. So those metrics are pretty set in stone. And non-digital metrics have been around since the 40s. Digital metrics, conversely, have been around less than 30 years. So remind people of that. Metrics are still evolving to understand a whole host of things: stickiness, velocity, so on. Marketers have become, though, connectors. That's the message around occupation for marketers. Complexity and depth, though, has forced specialization and talent. At present, In my view, I haven't met them yet, maybe I'll meet you tonight afterwards, there are very few complete marketing athletes out there. It's why every growth-minded marketer should be fine-tuning their twin engines of thought, design thinking and systems thinking. Those responsible for leading teams know that less and less is getting managed generally anymore. And it's just nearly impossible, both at any given time or over time, for a marketer to keep up with the digital evolution because the rate of change across so many platforms is dizzying. Mad Men's Don Draper would need to go back to school to compete with today's athlete. As new disruption, new innovations continue to arise, more specialties are going to emerge that we don't even know about. New titles, new skills, new ways of thinking. At the same time, the ideal marketer's basic skills are changing. The next generation of marketers out there are going to be better than the previous one. Just like today's NFL or NBA players are simply better athletes, I have no problem conceding that. The one fear I do have is the role of general strategy skills for tomorrow's marketer. The ability to have a field general's command of the glance, to turn data into insights and to make the tough calls on strategy that require gaining competitive advantage. That's what strategy is, competitive advantage. Connecting the dots, we arrive at the pivotal revelation aptly chronicled by Scott Brinker, author of Hacking Marketing, a great book. He said, modern marketing and management and operations has a lot in common with software development. So if technology is making everything easier for people, why is there such an explosion of complexity that's intimidating some marketers? Largely, it's because of the entanglement of the underlying systems. Beneath those beautiful visualizations and dashboards is a sprawling root system of software dynamics. Marketing in the digital age is inherently more complex. Just review this chart. This has certainly made marketing more challenging, but more impactful and more gratifying, even thrilling. And I'm sorry if all this change is disorienting or distressing or I've violated your sensibilities with some of the things I've said. Even in an age when the original boot, thimble, and wheelbarrow pieces for Monopoly will be replaced by Tyrannosaurus Rex, a penguin, and a rubber ducky. And Crayola is replacing a crayon in the classic 24-pack for the first time since 1903. We'll get used to it, while the next generation will never miss any of it to begin with. Technology and automation have been on a steady march for decades, first doing the dangerous, then the dirty, then the dull, now the decision-making. It can be downright disconcerting to envision a technology that takes us across a bridge too far, to singularity, which means runaway superintelligence that ends human race as we know it. But I'm here to be encouraging, not fatalistic. So let's look at the bright side, where the Academy of Medicine, no less, has thrown down the gauntlet with a grand challenge to crack the code on what they call healthy longevity. Said another way, there are leading medical researchers out there who are quite certain that the aging process can be stopped. They point out that curing cancer and heart disease only actually increase the average lifespan by a couple years each. But of course, if we can arrest the aging process, forever is the limit, customer lifetime value for the marketer. Is there an imminent battle shaping up between technology and humanity? Is this a modified sequel to the 18th century epic battle between the church and the Age of Enlightenment? Many would say there's room for both beliefs to coexist, but I'll leave you with this. The AMA has an alliance with an artificial intelligence platform powered by IBM's Watson. Her name is Lucy, named after Thomas Watson's granddaughter. Lucy, in a matter of weeks, ingested 80 years of all of the AMA's content ever created, across all our journals, all our magazines, all our just everything. A couple weeks. Lucy's foray into marketing isn't where she began, though. She was first used in the medical field, where she proved with all of the world's leading cancer research experts and all of their knowledge as her knowledge layer, she proved that she could diagnose cancer faster and more accurately than the world's leading cancer experts could alone. But, more importantly, and perhaps heartening, it was proved that Lucy and the experts together could diagnose cancer faster and more accurately than either alone. 1 + 1 = 3. And that's why Lucy's founder, Scott Littman, named his company Equals 3. When you think about it, this goes right back to the same point I mentioned early on about the power of diversity over IQ. That is perhaps the most hopeful message of all. Thank you.
We're now, if anyone has a question, we have a microphone, and I think Russ is okay with answering a few questions.
I'll do my best. Come on. You can tell me I'm an idiot.
Hey, how are you? Rebecca with MapQuest.
Hi, Rebecca.
Super relevant, obviously, to what I do. I think what's really interesting as you close that out is when you talk about the human aspect and technology aspect, you referred to Lucy as she, right?
Yes.
And when you talk about Amazon and what they're doing with Alexa, they stole
Yeah.
my daughter's name, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Not really happy about that, but it's also a she. So I think it's interesting that there's still like this kind of personal aspect that these big companies are able to put against technology. I just wanted to, think what you think, just want to know what you think about that, obviously,
Yeah.
from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
And the trust factor that kind of comes into that.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably say something that's totally politically incorrect and get myself into trouble by answering the question. I don't know the answer, of course. I don't know the real answer. I'll ask Scott, though. I will ask him. But I think it was more about Lucy was Thomas Watson's granddaughter than it was, let's name this after a female. But nonetheless, Alexa, I think that I'm a huge believer in social anthropology and sort of the irrefutable, there are certain, in my view, irrefutable truths, anthropological truths about how people are wired and how they perceive certain things. And I think it's a positive in the sense that there may be something that about the female species or gender that is friendlier, nicer, more maternal, more helpful, potentially. That's me, blabbering. I really don't know.
That's awesome. I guess what I was maybe going for is that it reinforces the fact that there always needs to be that human element, right?
Yeah.
There's still some type of a gender reference. And
Yes.
I think it's interesting that society has just kind of, they've adapted it. And
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
most people here, have referenced Alexa or, Echo or any of these.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's kind of cool about it.
Yeah, and I thought the Facebook, the research too was insightful though. That so yes, people want they want the humanity, but they also don't want you to waste their time. Who's been on the telephone like getting a problem resolved with somebody, and you finally get it resolved, and then the agent asks you that last question about, is there anything else I can do for you, after you've been on the phone with them for like 20 minutes, and you're like, please, just let me off the line. And I think, that's kind of what their insight was. And it just underscores to me that I think that time is coming into focus as a very different currency in society. That's why I think it might replace money, especially if money gets replaced by blockchain and trust gets distributed into, essentially, into the population, which is, mind-boggling. But, yep. Anybody else? Come on, really?
This is the table right here.
I guess, really. So as a longtime marketer and running businesses, I'm going to ask you a question that wasn't really part of your speech, but I have a lot of interest in it, which is, if you look at what happened during the election this year, that everybody called it wrong. Every surveyor, every pollster, everybody called it wrong, right? They called Brexit wrong. They've called everything wrong. So what do you think the impact of all this artificial intelligence, all this social media has on the research function? And I ask that question because I think probably many of us in the room that are CMOs have research and insights underneath us as well. And so I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
So the AMA, actually we did an article post-election. You should check it out on ama.org. You don't have to join the AMA to read the article. Where we, because we are not a political organization, we tried to be a vessel through which other people gave their perspective. And the one thing that gets my attention more than anything in that whole discussion is the assertion by many that they actually didn't get it wrong, that they actually had said all along that it was in the margin of error, that most of the research was saying it really is within the, it's still that close, and so I think often we just don't want to, we think of that as like this sort of disclaimer, that yeah, I get it, but which one won? Which one is ahead? And I think the hard data scientists that I've talked to about this, they're like, most of those polls were saying it could go either way, in terms of the margin of error. So, that's the first place I go in that discussion. The other layers on that discussion, I think have to do with strategy, of the electoral strategy that was used, and those kinds of things that maybe weren't properly reflected in the polling, that they didn't quite capture what was really going on in the power states that were going to tip the election. But, obviously an amazing historic event. Yep.
Russ, obviously a lot of content, different themes I was going to say a lot of content, different themes in your conversation. Hypothetically, if you were to say you were up here and you were sharing your reflections with us 10 years ago, 20 years ago, what would you underscore from that has changed the most? What is most different if you were talking to us 10 years ago maybe versus tonight that you think is really at the very core of what's evolved?
The network, the connectedness, and how that has changed the role of the marketer to become much more of a systems thinker and someone who, rather than sort of these linear kind of target strategy, sort of linear almost militaristic approaches, to this asymmetrical emergent environment where an idea or a competitor can come up overnight or disappear overnight, and so that the network just creates this sort of combustibility out there, right? One actor, one bad actor or one good actor can just send ripples through the whole. So to me, that's like structurally the big that's the big difference. Yeah.
Okay, so help me with millennial versus IQ. So diversity versus IQ.
Yep.
So do I give up my world to the millennial and their strong ideas? How do I balance this diversity versus IQ?
Well, we all want smart people around us, but for me, the insight was pretty profound. That there's almost a mathematical component to why diversity has incremental or even geometric returns, and IQ has diminishing returns. There's a mathematical factor that drives that. And so, I still think you have to lead. You have to, you still have to. What hasn't changed in business and marketing is leaders have to identify and articulate a vision in which other people can see themselves playing a starring role in that vision so that they're enrolled in it. And once you've done that, I think you have everybody engaged, and when it comes to problem-solving capabilities of any given team, I am a big believer in this this mentality of a squad level number of people. Not too many people, but enough so that you're effective, like a squad. Is built around. It's got to be a strong enough fighting force, but it's also got to be agile and able to move and make decisions and so forth. So, for me, it's just it helps me think differently about not sweating like, oh my God, my quote best person is not available to put on this project or whatever. As opposed to, do I have a complement of players here who can, with good leadership, solve the problem? That's kind of, I guess, what it means to me. Yeah.
Hello, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've worked in CPG food for the majority of my career, and I love a lot of the examples that you've given, but the vast majority of them were not related to CPG or food specifically. Do you have any examples of brands in CPG, or more particularly food, that have done what you're talking about well?
That's a great question. I should have an answer for that.
It's fine to say no one does. I'll try to be the first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested. I certainly am interested in who you think is. I'm sure there's folks out there that are doing it well. It's not top of mind for me. I'm because of my own background. I tend to look at services in retail and restaurants a lot. But who out there? Who do you guys think is doing it well? Who's connected as a packaged goods product? Soap companies, and I do think that Gatorade. I was involved with Gatorade for many years. That's almost soft drinks is kind of a little different than it is a packaged good. So if that counts, that certainly would be an example, I think. But Gatorade, all of this stuff. What's that? Dove. Yeah. Dove is a great one, actually, yeah. But so what's common about Gatorade and Dove, so far at least, from what I know, is what I see working for those brands is great insight work to the customer, So I don't know quite as much about how artfully or effectively they're managing omni-channel, marketing and measuring and optimization, and I don't know if they're killing it doing that. Same thing with Dove. But as a brand, I agree, those two, Gatorade and Dove, are good brand examples of great customer insight work. I do a presentation called Tension in Advertising because it is my theory that all great advertising has at its root a source of tension. And Gatorade is actually the Is It In You campaign is what I wrote the brief for that campaign when it was created many years ago, and it spurred me to develop this theory around tension being at the root of all effective advertising, and from that point on, I used that approach, and in fact, when I hired Crispin Porter Bogusky as the CMO of Burger King and shared with them that brief and asked Alex to work with that in terms of our account, a month later he adopted it for the whole agency, and now that is Crispin Porter Bogusky's whole approach to advertising is tension-based insights. So, but just kind of thinking out loud, customer insight work is still important.
Yeah, in terms of content marketing, which is an interest of mine as an academic and marketing professor, you were not bullish on it, but some people are developing a content library of being helpful in various, to various respects along the customer journey. But what you're saying, if the customer journey is disappearing, wouldn't it still make sense to develop content, to have it handy when you need to be helpful in an experience economy? So still content marketing would apply in your model, but in a different way.
Yes, I think it's a great point. I think that's another feature, Dave asked the question about what's really different. That's another feature of what's really different is it's a pull. It's a pull world. It's not a push world. And so content marketing has got to stay, it's always got to be in the right place so that when that sensing dynamic happens, someone can pull, can retrieve it. But I think now technology is enabling people to be able to do that. But I think it's a great point.
We're talking about Crispin Porter. Where do you think creativity is going to go? With all this technology as part of the inspiration, we still have to recruit young people to be creative in our industry. Where is that going, and where do you see that happening?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, the marketing side of it in terms of careers and developing, hiring people and developing them, because I think there is such a specialty dynamic that's emerging there. There's some amount of that on the agency side, but digitally creative people are still critical, to the process. I guess. I think it should be a frontier that's exciting for young creative. The idea because the environment is such that, like I said, one actor, one great idea now has the chance to become a overnight global, and so I think the reward there for somebody who, I referred to creative acts of creative disobedience. I think the reward there for people now to engage, I think the a creative job in an agency, particularly digital, is an exciting opportunity. Somebody asked me a couple of months ago if I thought the best work is getting on the air or getting executed, and I said no, I don't. I mean, my own experience is that, unfortunately, the best work is sitting in a wastebasket somewhere, and on average, sometimes it gets through. I think clients are mostly responsible for that. I've always felt that there are more good agencies out there than there are good clients, and I can say that having been a client a number of times. So I've been on both sides. Leo Burnett, the man, when a new business prospect would call him, he would ask to see their reel, because he wanted to know if that client had a culture and a reputation of making good decisions, selecting the right stuff. And if somebody looked like they were constipated and couldn't ever seem to get a good idea out there, you'd say no thanks. So what else?
I'm interested in your thoughts again on the consumer journey. Do you believe that journey still exists, or that it just, you go through them at hyperspace speed, or that you just enter? It's a possibility that you just enter completely at that point of need, and you bypass, the things that we all went to school to learn about awareness, and you
hierarchy
don't care
of effects.
about that hierarchy anymore, and just.
There are some things I would say I'm certain about, and other things I just don't know. I'm certain that there's a compression that's going on in the customer journey, and I think that's going to be a real, important issue for marketers to understand how that's happening in any given space, and how it's happening within segments in a space and with a brand. I don't think it's heresy to think that someone could have an artificial, could have an implant that literally can, through synapses, fire off a purchase, by just thinking about it. I think that's going to be possible, and so if that's true, how do you get in there? How do you get in there? And it's to the question earlier from the professor is, I think you have to position your brand so that when you are available for selective attraction when the time comes for somebody to make a decision. And that's still important to do, and so that's still about making sure that the story part of the equation is right, and that you're shaping it as much as you can, and that you're co-creating it. So that story is there, and it will be pulled, it will be drawn upon, in that kind of sense, in this hyper, advanced world, if that actually happens.
So you were talking about tension, and obviously important, really, 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 really hard, right? And certainly Burger King and Crispin Porter, some of their best work that's ever been done. How do you explain tension and its importance in marketing to entry-level creatives and employees?
Well, I have a case study and I have a presentation on it. So the way I explain it is that first off, there's lots of evidence-based research that proves that stories are more effective at generating customer engagement, customer emotive reactions, that stories are superior to flat recitals of facts, like just the facts. So that's evidence-based research. That's one point. So okay, so I got you to. So we're about stories here, and we're about some sort of emotional appeal. So then my next observation is that all great stories, literature, movies, there's a source of tension. You can find it. And my belief is that because most people aren't out there with creative briefs that have tension in them, that are using tension as a starting point. But what I'm saying is that if they in fact ended up doing great advertising, that I can find it. I can find it in that advertising. And the point of all of this is if you can find it and institutionalize it and use it as a upstream sort of variable that in order to ensure more great work in the future, rather than just leaving it up to chance that the creatives will intuitively come up with something that happens to have a spark that emanates from tension. Freud said that without tension, there is no release. Without release, there's no joke. And, some people have said a joke is pain plus time. But again, at the source of it is tension. And tension is not, by the way, it's not about creating, that doesn't mean it's going to create advertising that's dark or intense or provocative. It could be Subaru does, I think, their work. There's a tension in that. And even though I don't know what their briefs look like to create their work, but if I was the CMO tomorrow of Subaru, I would be trying to take what I think is going on in their work and make sure that that's reflected upstream in their strategy work so that you can ensure, because when I started working this way, what I saw happening was instead of like one good piece of work coming from a creative team in a meeting, I would start to see 4 or 5 really like on the nose pieces of work and that's why I think bringing that upstream rather than leaving it up for somebody's creativity, which is also where it can be discovered, but it's just not, to me, it's better business to bring it upstream. But I have a whole presentation on it. I guess through Nick or somebody I could send it to you.
For sure. We just have one last question here, and then we'll thank Russ and call it a night.
So you talked about measurement and the lack thereof, in terms of CMOs. I think there was too much emphasis on ROI and not enough on the intangibles and the experience. But I think we've swung the pendulum to the other side, which is now it's ROI balls. That everyone's looking at how many impressions they have or how many likes they have. I mean, I'm sort of curious on your feeling of the right balance. I mean, I think right now we're reporting too much on, how many people tuned in, but we can't measure it. We don't know how to measure it. We don't know how it turns into sales. So I think it's kind of, we're swinging both ways, but I'm just trying to figure out where the right place to set.
Yeah. Well, I think you and everybody in here is gonna figure that out as a community, because if investment in data analytics is going to go up 400% over the next 3 years, or 367%, then people are obviously trying to, it's like an arms race. People are trying to get built up so that they can measure and be able to adapt and in real time and that sort of thing. So I think it's important to embrace it for what it can bring you. The biggest thing to me that all of this stuff brings is it has de-risked a lot. It's de-risked a bias toward action, because now you can act, and if you're wrong, you can and you can adapt, right? And companies for the better part of the 21st and 20th century, one of the things in common that a lot of companies have is a knowing versus doing gap. And now the technology is in the ability to measure these things is allowing us to learn by doing, rather than to sit in all of these death by PowerPoint meetings trying to get like the last 10% of knowledge inside your organization before you go out to actually find out if you've got a good idea. Now, you can go and so that, to me, if I were going back onto the operating side, I would want to make sure my team knew. It's like learn by doing. Make sure you're using these measurements as a strategic advantage, rather than just like something that the CFO is going to start to feel happier about or whatever. That to me is where I would start anyway. Does that help?
Please join me in thanking Russ Klein for a phenomenal keynote.
Thank you.